When I returned to our lakeside home after 5 years abroad, I found all the walls repainted a pristine white and the wooden floors completely replaced. Confused, I checked the security cameras I had secretly installed. On the screen, my daughter's cold voice rang out, sending a shiver down my spine. He still thinks I'm his little girl. What I saw my daughter do next made my heart stop. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we dive in, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely surprise you? Yes or no? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs today. Some details have been adapted for storytelling and reflection. The core lesson, what really matters, is what I hope stays with you. The coral was gone. Not chipped, not faded, not peeling at the corners the way old paint does when salt air finds the seams. Gone, entirely buried under 2 careful coats of white that someone had applied with professional rollers working from the baseboard up to the crown molding, leaving no drip lines, no missed patches, no evidence of haste. The color had survived 2 hurricanes, a kitchen renovation, and the slow brightening that salt air does to pigment over time. It had survived my wife's 4-month illness and the weeks after when I could not enter this house without her in it. It had survived 5 years of my absence in Singapore. The shuttered windows, the canceled landscaping service, the unopened mail I had arranged to hold at a post office box I never checked. It had not survived Tamara. I stood in the doorway with October heat against my back and understood, without moving further inside, that this was not a renovation. It was an erasure. Someone with access and time and motive had stood in my wife's living room and painted over everything she chose. My carry-on bag sat on the porch behind me. I had flown Miami to Key Largo and driven the rest the familiar route past the bait shops and the charter boat docks and the low bridges where the Atlantic and the Gulf leaned toward each other across thin strips of rock and mangrove. 16 hours of travel from Singapore with the specific purpose of returning to this house for the first time since Francis died. I stepped inside. The floors were new. Francis's worn oak, the boards that had creaked in 3 specific places she had memorized so she could navigate to the kitchen at night without waking me, had been replaced with clean hardwood, sealed and silent. The kitchen counters had been re-edged. The ceiling fan in the hallway was a different model than the one I remembered. Every change was tasteful, considered, expensive. This was not vandalism, it was an occupation. I stood in the center of the living room and said aloud the way a man does when he needs to hear his own voice confirm something real. I have not spoken to a contractor. I have not authorized any work. The only person with a key besides myself is Tamara, my daughter. I am 32 years old. The last time I had seen her in person was at Francis's funeral. Her hand had gripped mine during the service with a force that left marks, not grief, I understood now, but something harder. Something that needed an anchor. 3 weeks after the burial, I had booked a flight to Asia and not looked back. I walked to the master bedroom. Francis's reading chair was still there in the corner by the window where the morning light came in at the right angle. That detail struck me, everything else changed, but the chair left exactly where she had placed it. I did not know what to make of that. I set it aside. Francis's laptop was in the closet safe. Her password was her birthday, the same one she had used for every account for 40 years, despite my professional objections. I had always known that. She had known, I knew. It was a kind of private joke between us about the gap between security theory and the actual habits of people who trusted each other. The screen came alive. Her dual authentication camera system, the one she had designed and installed over 6 months in 2009 after a break-in attempt at a neighbor's property, was still active. Cloud backup, redundant servers, hidden hardware in the smoke detectors and the ceiling fixtures. She had understood from her years in cybersecurity that the cameras people cannot see are the only cameras that matter. She had also understood something I had not, that the threat when it came would know the house. 3 months of stored footage. I scrolled backward through weeks of empty rooms, salt light moving through shuttered windows, nothing disturbing the dust. Then, at the 90-day mark, the timestamp changed. Tamara came through the front door first. I watched her on the small screen and felt the particular stillness that comes when a fact you have been avoiding becomes undeniable. She moved through my living room with the precision of someone who had planned every step before arriving, no hesitation at the threshold, no pause to absorb the space, no moment of recognition at her mother's things. She pointed at the far wall, and 2 men behind her marked the surface with chalk, using ultrasonic scanners I recognized from high-end construction work. Behind them came Merritt, my son-in-law of 6 years 34 years old, carrying something heavy wrapped in blue tarp. His posture told me everything the footage could not say aloud. He moved like a man performing a task he could not refuse. They cut into the wall, inserted a metal container, sealed the cavity with fresh drywall, sanded, primed, painted, all in a single night. Professional, thorough. Tamara touched nothing with her bare hands. I played it a second time, watching her face on the small screen. The face I had last seen at a graveside gripping my hand. The face that had her mother's bone structure and her mother's habit of going still when thinking. She never looked uncertain, not once. I found Frances's crowbar in the garage in the bracket she had mounted beside the water heater, for reasons she had never explained to me. I stood in the living room, measuring the wall by memory, against the footage 12 inches left of the window, 18 inches above the baseboard. The drywall gave way on the third strike. New construction, not the original plaster. Clean cuts. Easy access. The container sat wedged between the studs exactly where the footage showed. I pulled it free. Approximately 15 pounds. The latches opened without a key. Inside tablets wrapped in anti-static film, USB drives labeled by date notarized documents bearing seals. I recognized from 30 years of international finance work, the kind of paperwork that documents the movement of large money through structures designed to obscure it. Bearer bonds, offshore account statements, wire transfer confirmations running to 8 figures across multiple shell entities. Someone had assembled a complete evidence archive of serious financial crime. Beneath the container, taped flat against the back wall of the cavity, a sealed envelope. Inside, a United States passport bearing my name and someone else's photograph, my approximate build and age, not my face. My original Social Security card. My driver's license from 2019, the one I had reported lost to the DMV before I left the country. The villa's property deed, which should have been in my files in Singapore. And a handwritten note in script I did not recognize, precise and small. If anyone finds this before him, this is proof he hid it. I sat with that sentence for 3 seconds. Then I understood the architecture of what I was holding. This was not hidden evidence. It was planted evidence. The container was designed to be found by the wrong people at the wrong moment, with my identifying documents surrounding it. My daughter had not simply concealed something in my house. She had constructed a trap with her father as the intended victim. The doorbell rang. Through the front window, I saw a black SUV at the curb engine running a second man seated in the passenger side. On the porch, mid-40s, broad through the shoulders, the practiced stillness of someone accustomed to delivering unwelcome news, with an air of official authority. I slid the container under the couch and opened the door 6 inches. Otis Whitfield. Not a question. Rufus Yates. I represent legal counsel for the federal proceeding associated with this property. He produced a folded document. Property seal order. Immediate seizure of the residence and all contents pending investigation. The case number was printed in the upper right corner of the document. I had seen that number before in consulting work years ago, reviewing a county file before it was corrupted and purged from the system in 2021. The file no longer existed. The case number had died with it. That proceeding was closed and destroyed 3 years ago, I said. The county purged it in 2021. I reviewed the original file. His expression did not flicker, but the timing of his next breath was wrong by half a second. The kind of involuntary tell that appears in people who are not expecting accurate counter-information. Sir, I need you to step outside and allow us to... I closed the door, engaged the deadbolt, moved. Frances's voice from some night long ago when she was explaining her security logic to me. Always have a second way out. Not because you plan to run, because having one means you never have to panic. The water heater alcove. The access panel she had built into the rear wall 15 years ago, behind the utility housing, was large enough for one person moving quickly. It opened onto the mangrove fringe at the property's back edge, 10 feet of root tangle and tidal mud. Before the trail she and I had walked on Sunday mornings when the light came low across the bay. I took the container, went through the panel, hit the mangroves at a run. Behind me, voices. Rufus called for backup. The SUV door opened. Footsteps on the porch, then on the lawn, then slowing as the terrain changed from manicured grass to tidal root systems that punish people unfamiliar with them. I knew this ground, every step of it. I ran. The deputy's first question wasn't about the men chasing me, it was about why I'd torn apart my own wall. Deputy Logan, maybe 26 with 2 years on the job, sat across from me in the fluorescent-lit interrogation room with the carefully neutral expression of someone trained to suspect everyone. The metal container sat between us on the scratched table. They'd wrapped it in evidence tape at the dock, photographed it from 6 angles, but hadn't opened it. Not yet. "Mr. Whitfield, want to explain why you tore apart your own wall?" The suspicion in his voice made me think of Tamara's warning, the one she'd left on my voicemail 3 years ago that I'd deleted without listening to completely. Something about connections, about being careful who I trusted in the keys. I'd stopped listening after she said "Dad." That word in her voice was a knife. "I found something that shouldn't have been there," I said carefully. "In your own house. In my locked house that I haven't entered in 5 years. Logan wrote that down. His pen scratched against cheap notebook paper. The sound reminded me of Francis grading cybersecurity exams at the kitchen table, always writing notes in margins, always teaching even when her students weren't there to see it. And the man who chased you, Rufus Yates. He had fraudulent legal documents, a case number from a file your county destroyed 3 years ago. Logan's pen stopped moving. "How do you know that?" "I reviewed that case file in my consulting work. International financial risk analysis. The file was corrupted and purged from your system in 2021. The deputy's eyes narrowed. I could see him thinking consultant who tears apart walls, runs from legal representatives, knows too much about destroyed case files. I could see the equation forming in his head, and it didn't end with me walking out of this room. I pulled out my phone. "I need to make a call." "Mr. Whitfield." One call, to family. I dialed before he could object. Vance answered on the second ring. Uncle Otis. Hearing his voice calm, federal, untouchable was the first relief I'd felt in hours. "Everything okay?" "I'm at the local police station in Islamorada. I found something in my house, something that involves Stuart Hoffman." Silence. Then, "Don't say another word." Put the deputy on the phone. I handed the phone to Logan. My nephew Vance Caldwell, 38, and now a federal agent in Washington, answered my desperate call with the calm authority of someone who'd been hunting men like Hoffman for years, and the concern of family who remembered when I wasn't running from grief. Vance was my sister's son. I'd taught him to fish at age 8 off Francis's dock, the same dock I'd called 911 from tonight. Helped pay for his criminology degree when his father walked out. Now, he was the only person on earth I could trust with what I'd found. Logan's expression changed as he listened. "Yes, sir. Special Agent Caldwell. Yes, sir. The container is right here. No, sir, we haven't opened it. Yes, sir." He handed the phone back. His whole demeanor had shifted, less suspicious, more careful. "Your nephew says you're coming to Miami," Logan said. "FBI wants the container. He's sending a car." "He say anything else?" "He said this is federal evidence in a 26-month investigation. He said not to let it leave my sight until the transfer is complete." Logan looked at the container with new eyes. "What the hell did you find, Mr. Whitfield?" "I don't know yet," I said, which was true. I knew what was in the container. I didn't know what it meant. How does a man process the moment he learns his daughter didn't just betray him? She became someone else entirely while he was gone. The FBI car arrived 90 minutes later. Black SUV, federal plates, 2 agents in dark suits who checked my ID 3 times and made Logan sign 5 different forms before they'd take custody of the container. We drove north to Miami. In silence, the container locked in a case between the front seats, me in the back, watching the Keys bridges disappear in the rearview mirror. Francis and I used to drive this route every Sunday. She'd make sandwiches, pack them in the blue cooler, and we'd stop at every scenic overlook to watch the water. "The ocean is different every time you look at it," she used to say. "Same water, different light. Same daughter, different light." The FBI Miami field office was a concrete fortress off Biscayne Boulevard. They took me through 3 security checkpoints, checked my ID 4 more times, and finally led me to a secure conference room where Vance was waiting. He looked older, gray at the temples now, but when he hugged me, he was still the 8-year-old kid who'd cried on my shoulder when his father left. "You okay?" he asked. "No." "Fair enough?" He gestured to the table where the container's contents were spread across clean white paper. "We need to talk about what you found. Tell me about Hoffman first." Vance pulled up a file on his laptop. "Stuart Hoffman, 62, CEO of Hoffman Development Corporation. We've been investigating him for 26 months for wire fraud, bribery of public officials, environmental crimes, and money laundering. The evidence in that container, He nodded at the spread documents. Is everything we've been trying to build for 2 years. Account numbers, wire transfers, bearer bonds. Someone documented his entire operation. So why hide it in my wall? That's what we need to figure out. Vance opened another file. But first there's something you need to see. He turned the laptop toward me. Bank account screen, offshore, Cayman Islands. Account opened July 15th, 2024, Vance said quietly. $1.425 million, and it's in your name, Uncle Otis. The room tilted. I didn't open any account. I know. The KYC video verification shows your face. Our technical team confirmed it's a deepfake sophisticated one, nearly perfect. But the IP address that initiated the account, he paused. Tamara's office computer, time-stamped during her work hours. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. There's one more thing. Vance pulled up another screen. Transaction history. $140,000 was transferred out of that account 3 weeks ago into Tamara's personal checking account. We traced the payments, mortgage, credit cards, car loan. I stared at the transaction record on Vance's screen. $140,000 transferred from the offshore account in my name to Tamara L. Whitfield. Account number 4782. Mortgage payment, credit cards, car loan. My daughter had been living on stolen money for 3 weeks, money stolen in my name while I was 8,000 miles away, believing she was struggling. The screen blurred. Show me more, I whispered. The folder Vance pulled from the container had no label. That was unusual. Everything else in the metal container had been organized with the precision of someone who understood that evidence lives or dies by its documentation. USB drives dated in sequence notarized documents sorted by issuing authority-bearer bonds separated from wire transfer confirmations by color-coded dividers. Merritt had been meticulous, the kind of methodical that comes not from training, but from genuine terror about being believed. This folder had no label because nobody was supposed to find it. Vance set it on the white paper, spread across the conference table, and opened it slowly, the way you open things when you are not certain what they contain. The contents spilled out in a cascade, pages printed on standard copy paper, photographs printed from digital files, flight manifests, hotel receipts, restaurant checks, time stamped across 5 years of my life. I had spent 8,000 miles away, believing I was invisible. What is this? I asked. Vance picked up the nearest photograph, set it down, picked up another. His expression was doing something careful and controlled that I had seen on younger agents when a case turned in a direction they had not anticipated. If someone documented your time in Singapore, he said, comprehensively. I looked at the photograph he had set down. A man sitting at a cafe table, outdoor seating, tropical light, the particular quality of late morning in Southeast Asia. The man was looking at his phone, unaware of the camera, a paper cup beside his hand, a briefcase leaning against his shin. The man was me. The timestamp read, June 18th, 2023, Francis's birthday. I had been sitting at that table for 90 minutes that morning, looking at photographs on my phone that I could not bring myself to delete. Pictures of her at the villa, at the dock, in the kitchen in 2016, laughing at something I had said. I remembered the weight of the phone in my hand, the coffee going cold, the way grief arrives not in waves, as people say, but in long, unmoving silences that fill up the space around you until there is no air left. Tamara had been watching. I picked up another photograph. The Ministry of Finance building, Singapore, December 2022. Me entering through the main doors, briefcase in hand, winter shirt and tropical heat. Then a third, a Sunday morning at the Botanic Gardens, April 2024. Me on a bench near the Symphony Lake. I had been reading. I remembered the bench, the angle of the morning light, the way the gardens smelled after rain. I had believed those mornings were private. I had believed the distance had at least purchased me, that the anonymity of absence, the privacy of exile. At how long? I asked. Vance was sorting the pages by date, working quickly through the pile, with the organized attention of someone cataloging something that mattered. First document is October 2019, he said. 2 months after the funeral, he held up a flight manifest. Singapore Airlines, your outbound flight. Your seat number is highlighted. She tracked the flight I took to leave the country. She tracked every flight after that. Arrivals, departures, connections, every hotel. Your Tuesday coffee shop near the apartment. He paused on a page, frowned. Your walking route, Someone photographed your regular walking route from 3 different positions along it. I sat down. There is a specific kind of discovery that does not arrive as shock, it arrives as the confirmation of something you have been carrying without naming. I had known somewhere beneath the professional analysis and the federal evidence and the clean forensic language of the preceding hours that what Tamara had done was personal in a way that fraud charges did not fully capture. The offshore account, the planted evidence, the stage break-ins, those were tactical. This was something else. This was grief. That she hired someone, I asked? Almost certainly. This level of sustained surveillance across international jurisdictions requires professional infrastructure. Surveillance operators, local contractors, access to airline records. Vance turned over a hotel receipt. Grand Hyatt Singapore, your March 2023 stay, room 847. She has your room number, check-in time, and checkout time. She knew I wouldn't return without warning, I said. The realization came as I said it, each word shaping the thought as I released it. That is why she felt safe working in the house. Not because she thought I had forgotten it existed. Because she knew exactly where I was on any given day. She knew I would not come back suddenly. She had 5 years of evidence that I was very good at staying gone. Vance was quiet for a moment. Or, he said carefully, she couldn't let you go. I looked at him. Look at the detail, he said, spreading photographs across the table. This is not a threat assessment. A professional investigator hired to track your movements for security purposes produces location data, not this. He gestured at the arrangement. The cafe photograph, the Botanic Gardens bench, the ministry doorway. These are images of a man sitting alone, reading, walking, looking at his phone. He paused. She wasn't building a case against you, Uncle Otis. She was watching her father from 8,000 miles away because she couldn't stop. The conference room felt very still. I looked at the photograph from June 18, 2023. Me at the cafe. Francis's birthday, the cold coffee, and the phone full of photographs I could not delete. From wherever Tamara had positioned the camera, you could not see the phone screen. You could not know what I was looking at. You could only see a man sitting alone at a table in the late morning, not moving in no apparent hurry to go anywhere. She had looked at that image and not known what it contained. I had looked at those photographs of Francis for 90 minutes, and then paid my bill and walked home and made dinner and gone to bed and done nothing about any of it, because doing something would have required going back, and going back was the one thing I could not make myself do. She had been watching me not go back. She hired someone, I said again. This did not come cheap. We will trace the payments, Vance said. Private investigation agencies operating across Singapore and Malaysia leave financial trails. Give Dwight 2 days. He began photographing the pages with his phone for the evidentiary record. But I need you to understand what we are dealing with before we go further. This is not just fraud. The fraud was operational Hoffman-Lancaster, the offshore account, the planted evidence. That was a plan she executed. This, he gestured at the surveillance file. This is something she maintained for 5 years, something she chose every month for 60 months, to keep paying for, keep receiving, keep organized in a folder she kept inside a metal container hidden in her father's wall. She wanted it found, I said slowly, or she could not bring herself to destroy it. He looked at me. I have been in federal law enforcement for 14 years. I have worked cases involving fraud, extortion, complex conspiracy. I have never worked a case where the criminal kept the most personally damning document in the most prominent position inside their own evidence archive. He tapped the folder. The offshore account is 3 layers deep. The bearer bonds required an expert to trace. This folder was on top of everything else, unlabeled, the first thing you encounter when you open the container. I had no response to that. I sat with it instead. My phone was on the table in front of me. I had silenced it 2 hours earlier when we arrived at the FBI office. The screen was dark. I did not pick it up. The conference room door opened. A man entered without knocking, which in an FBI conference room at midnight meant he had either been invited or had enough credentials to make the distinction irrelevant. He was mid-30s, slight build, the compressed alertness of someone who ran on 4 hours of sleep, and treated that as adequate. He was carrying a laptop and a paper evidence bag. "This is Agent Prakash from Cybercrimes," Vance said to me, then to Prakash. "The drive from earlier." Prakash set the laptop on the table and opened the evidence bag. Inside was a portable hard drive and a clear evidence sleeve. The same drive Merritt had retrieved from his basement panel earlier that evening, the one that had been remotely wiped at 2:47 a.m. 3 days prior. "You pulled anything from it?" Vance asked. "Partial recovery," Prakash said. He opened the laptop, connected the drive through an evidence cable. The wipe was professional, formatted, zeroed, overwritten. Whoever did it knew what they were doing, but they were working remotely, which means they were limited to what the drive's own firmware allowed. Physical access lets you go deeper. He pulled up a recovery interface. 14 documents recovered out of approximately 847. Fragments mostly. Headers and metadata without body content. But 3 are readable. He turned the laptop toward us. The first recovered document was a transaction log, partial the header, and roughly 60 lines of entries before the data corrupted, enough to see the structure. Offshore account numbers I recognized from the container, dollar amounts moving through shell entities, dates spanning February through September of the current year. "Yet this is what Merritt documented," Vance said. "Subset of it," Prakash confirmed, "but enough to establish the framework. If the prosecution already has the originals from the bank container, this serves as independent corroboration. 2 separate copies independently stored, producing consistent records. Defense will have difficulty arguing fabrication." The second document was an email chain. Partial recovery, 3 messages visible. The sender on the first was an address I did not recognize. The recipient was Merritt's personal account. The subject line read, "Confirmation KLM Holdings, Q. 3 audit discrepancies. Marcus Finch," Vance said quietly. He looked at me. "The independent auditor." I read the recovered fragment. Finch writing to Merritt about specific discrepancies he had located in the KLM Holdings quarterly report numbers that did not reconcile against the environmental compliance filings, a pattern he had seen before in cases involving split ledger accounting. He had written, "We need to meet, not over email. What I've found is larger than we discussed." The email was dated September 1st, 2024, 2 days before his death. Neither Vance nor I said anything for a moment. The third recovered document was a calendar file, fragments only a date, header a location field, and a single line of notes. October 18th, 2024. Location Islamorada. Notes. Check panel. Verify removal complete. Vance read it twice. Then he looked at me. October 18th, the night before the remote wipe. "She was there in person, first," I said. "She drove to Islamorada, checked the wall, confirmed the container was properly concealed, and the drywall was clean, then drove back and wiped the backup drive remotely the following morning. She wanted both copies accounted for before you arrived," Vance said. "The Villa copy set and ready, the backup drive gone. She was closing out the operation. She arrived 2 days before I did," I said. "She knew my flight schedule." He glanced at the surveillance folder. "She knew everything about your schedule." Prakash closed the recovery interface and removed the drive. "I can get you more fragments by morning. The deeper sectors may yield additional content." "Run it," Vance said. Prakash left. We sat in the silence he left behind. The surveillance folder was still spread across the table, decades of my life, documented in photographs and receipts and flight manifests assembled by a woman who had orchestrated financial crimes and overseen the deaths of 2 men, and still somehow spent 5 years watching her father sit alone at cafe tables in foreign cities. "She was half right," I said finally, "about all of it." Vance waited. "She said I ran from grief. That distance blinds people." I looked at the photograph from Francis's birthday. "The coffee is going cold." She was not wrong about any of that. She was wrong about what she chose to do with it. "Those are different things," Vance said carefully. "I know." I pushed the photograph back into the folder. "I know." Outside the conference room window, Miami was doing what Miami does at midnight, living loudly and indifferently, light and traffic and water, all moving together in the dark. I had sat in this building for 6 hours, and the city had not noticed and would not notice, and that was exactly correct. Vance stood, moved toward the door. "I'll get coffee." He paused. "And Uncle Otis tomorrow is going to be harder." Dwight traced the full payment history. What Tamara received, what she paid, who she paid it to. He met my eyes. "The surveillance operation is not the worst of it." I already knew that. But tonight, in this fluorescent quiet with her photographs still fanned across the white evidence paper and Francis's birthday caught in a digital timestamp that Tamara had watched from across an ocean tonight, for one moment, I held both things at once. The criminal she had become, the daughter who could not stop watching. Then I set the folder aside and waited for coffee and prepared as I had been preparing since October to face whatever came next. The autopsy photos laid across the conference table told the story. Vance's voice didn't. These weren't accidents. How many? I asked. Merritt sat beside me, staring at the photos like they might disappear if he looked hard enough. Vance opened 2 files. 2 that we can prove so far, maybe more. The first photo showed a crushed sedan highway patrol markers scattered around twisted metal. The second showed a man slumped over a desk, his face turned away from the camera. Robert Cross, age 48, Hoffman's financial advisor. Vance's finger tapped the first photo. Single car accident on I-95 3 months ago, July 12th, 2024. Brake failure, except the mechanic's report shows his brakes were serviced 2 days before. New pads, new fluid, perfect condition. Could be coincidence, I said, but I didn't believe it. Could be. Vance opened the second file. Marcus Finch, 52 marathon runner, ran 6 miles every morning before work. Independent auditor, heart attack in his office, September 3rd, 2024. No prior cardiac history. The medical examiner noted unusual potassium levels in his blood work, but ruled it natural causes. Merritt's voice was barely a whisper. I hired Marcus after I found the Hoffman discrepancies. I needed someone outside the company to verify what I was seeing. What did he find? Vance asked. Merritt's hands shook. He called me the night before he died, said he'd found something in the data, something that implicated more than just Hoffman. He wouldn't tell me over the phone, said we needed to meet in person. He never made it to morning. Vance pulled up his laptop, opened a map with colored pins. This is cell tower location data, Tamara's phone. He pointed to a red pin. July 12th, 2024, 11:47 a.m. She met Robert Cross at a coffee shop in Coral Gables. He left at 12:15 p.m. His car went off the 95 at 12:43 p.m. He moved his finger to another pin. September 2nd, 2024, 6:30 p.m. Tamara's phone pinged a cell tower 2 blocks from Marcus Finch's office. She was there for 18 minutes. Marcus died the next morning at 7:15 a.m. I'd spent 30 years analyzing financial risks, quantifying the probability of fraud, embezzlement, market manipulation. But I'd never learned how to calculate the risk that your own daughter would become an accessory to murder. There was no actuarial table for that kind of betrayal. You're saying she killed them? Merritt asked. I'm saying she was the last person to see them before they died, Vance said carefully. And I'm saying she had means, motive, and opportunity to leak their schedules and movements to someone who could make accidents happen. Who? I asked. We're still working on that. But whoever it was, they're professional, clean. No witnesses, no evidence beyond circumstantial. Merritt stood abruptly, walked to the window. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. She knew, he said quietly. When Marcus died, she came home and hugged me, told me she was sorry for my loss, that it was tragic. I cried on her shoulder. He turned back to us. She knew what she'd done, and she held me while I grieved. The conference room door opened. A man in his mid-40s entered carrying a laptop, his movements precise and methodical. Dwight Long, a 45-year-old forensic accountant with 2 decades tracking offshore money through the world's most sophisticated laundering systems, entered the conference room with the quiet confidence of someone who'd unraveled billion-dollar frauds and sent their architects to federal prison. You wanted the full trace on the $140,000, Dwight said, setting up his laptop. I've got it. Vance gestured to the screen. Show us. Dwight pulled up a flowchart that looked like a spider web. The money didn't originate from the offshore account in your name, Mr. Whitfield. That account was just a staging area. The real source is here. He highlighted a box at the top of the chart. Cayman Islands. Shell Corporation registered to another Shell Corporation. I traced it back 4 layers. And I leaned forward. All 4 shells are owned by the same person, Stuart Hoffman. Dwight clicked through screens. This isn't just a slush fund. It's a payment system. Hoffman uses it to compensate people who can't receive official payroll, people doing work he can't document. Like what? Vance asked. like internal espionage, like leaking investigator schedules, like being his eyes and ears inside his own company. Dwight turned the laptop toward us. The $140,000 that appeared in Tamara's account. It came from Hoffman's Cayman account, passed through 4 intermediary shells, to obscure the source, then deposited as if it originated from your offshore account. The room went silent. "This wasn't your daughter receiving stolen money, Mr. Whitfield," Dwight said quietly. "This was her being paid. Hoffman's been compensating her for 8 months since February 2024. He pulled up a transaction history. Total transferred $212,000. I stared at the numbers. February. That was when Merritt first discovered the discrepancies, when he started investigating Hoffman. She was his spy, Vance said, getting documents from Merritt's computer, leaking schedules of anyone investigating Hoffman. Robert Cross, Marcus Finch. She gave Hoffman everything he needed to. He stopped. Didn't need to finish. Merritt's voice was hollow. She knew what I was finding because she was sleeping next to me every night. Every time I made progress, every time I found a new lead, I'd tell her over dinner, "Look what I discovered today." And she'd smile and congratulate me and ask detailed questions. Then she'd report it to Hoffman, Vance said. "How much per month?" I asked Dwight. He scrolled through the transactions. "Varies. February through April, $15,000 per month. May, $25,000. June, $30,000. July, right after Robert Cross died, $45,000. August and September, $20,000 each. October, the final $140,000. And the payments increased when people died," I said. Dwight nodded. "Looks like bonuses for successful operations." I watched the dates align with everything Merritt had told us. February, when he first discovered the evidence. May, when he tried to hire Marcus Finch. July, when Robert Cross died. September, when Marcus died. October, when she hid the evidence in my wall and framed me. Tamara had been reporting everything to Hoffman in real time. Every move Merritt made, every name he mentioned, every threat to Hoffman's empire. "The final payment," Vance said slowly. $140,000, that's not a monthly stipend. That's payment for a specific job." "What job?" Merritt asked. Vance looked at me. "Framing your father. Making sure if anyone found the evidence, it would destroy the one person who might help you." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, Miami traffic moved through streets my daughter had walked, planning murders, collecting payments, becoming someone I'd never known. "If she was willing to help kill 2 men," I said quietly, "what had she planned for Merritt? What had she planned for me?" Merritt's hands shook when he described the first break-in, and I realized my daughter had weaponized his fear. "It was 6 weeks ago," he said, staring at the empty conference table where the autopsy photos had been. "August. I came home from work and the door was unlocked. I knew I'd locked it. I always lock it." "What was taken?" Vance asked. "Nothing. That's what scared me." Merritt's voice was barely above a whisper. "They didn't take the TV, the laptop, jewelry. They just left papers everywhere. Hoffman development documents scattered across the kitchen table. His business cards lined up in a row, like a message. 'A warning,' I said. That's what I thought. That Hoffman knew I was investigating him. That he was telling me to stop." Merritt looked at me. I was terrified. Tamara called the police, filed a report. They said it was probably teenagers' vandalism. But I knew better. There was a second break-in. Vance was taking notes. 2 weeks later, same thing, nothing stolen, more documents. This time they left a folder on our bed, environmental impact reports I'd copied from Hoffman's servers. Stuff that wasn't public, stuff only someone inside the company would have. Vance pulled up his laptop. "Did anyone come to inspect the apartment after security company lock service?" "Yeah, Tamara arranged it. Said we needed better protection." Merritt rubbed his face. "Apex Security Solutions. They installed new locks, cameras, a smart home system. Cost about $8,500. Tamara said it was worth it for peace of mind." I watched Vance's fingers fly across the keyboard. He opened corporate registry databases, payment records, shell company trackers. The same tools I'd used for 30 years to follow money through international labyrinths. How long had she been planning this? Months, years. Had she married Merritt already knowing she'd eventually use him? Or had Francis's death and my leaving transformed my daughter into someone who could weaponize a marriage? Apex Security Solutions, Vance said slowly. Registered in Delaware 3 months ago, July 2024. Single client payment history. He turned the laptop toward us. $8,500 from a credit card in Tamara's name. Not your joint account, Merritt. Her personal card. The one she opened in June. The room went silent. She hired them, I said. She hired people to break into her own home. The business cards, the documents, she planted them herself or had them planted, Vance added. Made you think Hoffman was warning you, so you'd panic and hide the evidence somewhere safe. Somewhere she could control. I finished. Merritt looked like he might be sick. My villa. Locked for 5 years. Only 2 keys in existence, mine and hers. You hid the evidence exactly where she wanted it. Merritt stood, abruptly walked to the window. His reflection looked broken. I suggested your villa, he said quietly. I said we needed somewhere Hoffman couldn't reach, somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Tamara hesitated, said she didn't want to violate your space. I insisted. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I thought I was being clever. I thought I was protecting us. You said there were 2 copies, Vance said. One at the villa, one hidden at your house. Where's the second one? Basement, behind the water heater panel. Tamara doesn't know about it. Merritt's voice carried the last shred of hope. I made that copy before she got into my computer. She never saw me hide it. Vance stood. Let's go get it, now. Merritt's townhouse sat in a quiet Coral Gables neighborhood. Brick facade, manicured lawn, smart doorbell camera blinking at us as we approached. The kind of place young professionals save years to afford. The kind of place that should feel safe. Tamara had turned it into a surveillance trap. Inside smelled like coffee and fear. Dishes in the sink, mail piled on the counter. Evidence of a life interrupted. Merritt led us downstairs to the basement, unfinished concrete water heater, humming in the corner. Storage boxes stacked against walls. Here. He knelt beside the water heater, pried open a panel I wouldn't have noticed. Behind it, a cavity between wall studs. Inside sat a portable hard drive, black plastic case, dusty but intact. Nobody knew, Merritt said, pulling it out carefully. Not even Tamara. I hid it here 6 months ago, right after I first found the Hoffman evidence. Vance took the drive, connected it to his laptop. His expression changed immediately. What? I asked. Drive's empty, completely wiped. He opened a diagnostic window. Formatted 3 days ago, October 19th. That's impossible, Merritt said. It's been in that wall for 6 months. I haven't touched it since I put it there. Vance opened another window. Smart home system logs. When did Tamara install the Apex security system? Mid-September, after the second break-in. And this drive, does it have Wi-Fi capability? Merritt's face went pale. It's a smart drive, auto backup to cloud when it detects a network. But it's been offline disconnected. When did you last check it? 4 days ago, October 18th. I wanted to make sure it was still there, still working. I connected it to my laptop just to verify the files were intact. They were. All 847 documents, every transaction record, everything. Vance scrolled through the smart home administrator logs. Administrator login T.Whitfield. Remote connection, October 19th, 2:47 a.m. Session duration, 6 minutes. Activity network device detected connection. Authorized remote wipe protocol initiated. The basement suddenly felt very cold. She wasn't just watching the house, Vance said quietly. She was watching every device you connected to your network. The moment this drive went online, just to verify it existed, she killed it remotely. You were asleep upstairs while she erased everything from wherever she was. Merritt sat down hard on the concrete floor. I thought this was my insurance policy, my backup plan. I was so careful. She's always been 3 steps ahead, I said. The break-ins, the smart home system, the terror campaign, all of it was setting up this exact moment, making you think you had leverage when you had nothing. Vance pulled up a map on his phone. You said there were 3 copies. Villa here and safe deposit box, Merritt whispered. Bank of America Brickell branch, box 447. That's the last one. I stared at the empty hard drive, its LED blinking uselessly. Tamara had waited like a spider. For the moment Merritt connected it, then struck from miles away at 2:47 in the morning while he slept 3 rooms away. We need to get to that bank, Vance said. Now, before she figures out we know about it. But I was thinking, if Tamara could reach into their home and delete evidence remotely, what else could she control from a distance, and how long before she realized we were coming for the last copy? We hit Miami traffic at the worst possible time. Vance running lights me, gripping the container from the villa, both of us praying Tamara hadn't reached the bank first. Brickell Avenue crawled. Lunch hour stretched into afternoon gridlock. Vance's FBI credentials got us through 2 intersections before a delivery truck blocked the third. Merritt sat in the back seat, silent, staring at his phone like it might explode. "She could be there already," he whispered. "She could have called the bank, claimed fraud, had them freeze the box." "Box is in your name only," Vance said. "She can't access it without you." "She's gotten into everything else." We pulled up to Bank of America's Brickell headquarters 20 minutes later. Glass tower marble lobby security that looked more military than banking. Vance flashed his badge. A manager appeared, press suit, nervous smile, and led us to the vault room in silence. Box 447. Merritt's hands shook as he turned the key. Inside a metal container, identical to the one from my villa. Same size, same weight, same industrial seals. Merritt lifted it out carefully, set it on the examination table. "Everything I documented about Hoffman is here," he said, opening the latches. "Tax fraud, environmental violations, bribery records." He pulled out folders, USB drives. Then he reached deeper, pulled out a second sealed envelope. "But this, I added this myself, without telling Tamara." Vance took the envelope, opened it carefully. Inside, printed message history. Texts, emails, voice memo, transcripts, hundreds of pages. "What is this?" I asked. Merritt's voice was barely audible. "Every communication Tamara had about selling the evidence. I recovered them from her laptop backup before she changed the passwords, before she locked me out." Vance spread the pages across the table. I saw names: Stuart Hoffman, Conrad Lancaster, dollar amounts that made the offshore account look like pocket change. For one brief moment, holding that intact container in the bank vault, I felt something close to hope. Tamara couldn't delete this, couldn't reach it, couldn't control it. Then I opened the message history and realized she'd never expected this copy to survive. She'd been that confident in her control. June 3rd, Vance read aloud. "Tamara to Conrad Lancaster. Complete package including offshore accounts, bearer bonds, wire transfer records, and environmental violation documentation. 2.125 million non-negotiable. Payment in Bitcoin to address below." He flipped pages. June 7th, Tamara to Stuart Hoffman. "Competitor has offered substantial sum for evidence package. You have 48 hours to beat the offer, or I proceed with sale. Current bid 2.125 million. More pages, more messages. June 15th, Vance continued. Hoffman replies, 700,000 plus new identities for you and husband. Witness protection grade documents. Immediate extraction to country of your choice. Evidence destroyed, no copies. She played them against each other, I said. An auction, months of negotiation. Look at the dates, Merritt whispered. June, July, August, September. Every month new offers, new counter-offers. She was living with me, sleeping next to me, and running a bidding war for evidence that could destroy both men. Vance photographed every page. This is conspiracy to commit wire fraud, extortion, obstruction of justice. Every message is another count, and she documented all of it. Because she never thought anyone would find it, I said. She controlled Merritt's computers, the villa, the apartment. This was her insurance policy proof she could use against either Hoffman or Lancaster if they turned on her. We loaded both containers into Vance's SUV, drove back to the FBI office in silence. Miami sunset painted Biscayne Bay orange and gold through the windows. Francis used to love Miami sunsets, used to say they looked like the world was on fire. My phone rang in the FBI conference room, Tamara's name on the screen. I looked at Vance. He nodded, started recording equipment. I answered. Dad! Her voice was shaking, crying. Dad, please, you have to listen to me. I'm listening, I said. Hoffman's men are looking for you. They know you have the container. They'll hurt you if you don't give them what they want. She was sobbing now. I'm so scared. Please just hand it over and this can end. I can't lose you too, not after Mom. I closed my eyes, heard Francis's voice in my memory. People act different when they don't know they're being watched. The signal detector, I said quietly to Vance. From my bag, turn it on. Professional habit from 30 years analyzing corporate espionage in Singapore. Always know where the call is coming from. Always verify the speaker's location. Trust nothing. Vance pulled the small device from my travel bag, activated it. His laptop screen flickered. Code ran. Triangulation software that Francis had helped me install years ago. "Please, Dad," Tamara was saying. "I know you don't trust me right now. I know things look bad. But I'm trying to protect you. Just tell me where you are. Let me help." Vance's screen updated. GPS coordinates appeared. Street address, floor number. He typed quickly, pulled up building records, then went pale. 1395 Brickell Avenue. He whispered, turning the screen toward me. 18th floor. That's Hoffman Development Group headquarters. Executive suite. I stared at the coordinates. Heard Tamara's voice in my ear, the slight echo I'd missed before. Office acoustics, hard surfaces, and beneath her sobbing, very faint Miami traffic. Not street level, high up. 18 floors up. "Dad, are you still there?" Tamara asked. "Please say something." She was sitting in Stuart Hoffman's office, right now, while calling me crying, begging me to save myself by surrendering. I could picture it, Hoffman at his desk, Tamara in a chair phone to her ear, tears streaming down her face, performing concern for an audience of one, coordinating the hunt for her father while pretending to be terrified for his safety. "I know you're scared," she said, voice breaking. "I know you don't understand what's happening, but I love you, Dad. I'm trying to save you." I looked at Vance, at Merritt, at the containers full of evidence showing exactly what my daughter had become. I hung up without saying a word. The conference room was silent. Tamara's coordinates still glowed on the screen. 1395 Brickell Avenue, 18th floor. The enemy's headquarters. My daughter was sitting with the man hunting me, and now she knew I knew. "She'll tell Hoffman we're onto them," Merritt said. "She already has," Vance replied. "The second you hung up, she knew you'd figured it out." I stared at my phone, Tamara's name still on the screen from the ended call. "What have I done?" I whispered. Vance's voice was grim. "You survived. Now we figure out what comes next." The message arrived 20 minutes after I hung up on Tamara from a number I didn't recognize, offering salvation I didn't believe. "Mr. Whitfield, this is Conrad Lancaster. Your son-in-law made promises he cannot keep. Now you are all in danger. I can help, but only if you trust me. Meet me in the hotel back parking lot. 1 hour. Come alone." Vance stood behind me in the FBI conference room, reading over my shoulder. "You've been reading my messages," I said, not a question. "We charged your phone earlier. Standard procedure." "How long have you known he would contact me, Vance?" "We hoped he would. That's why we let him see the message when your phone pinged his network." Vance sat across from me. "Uncle Otis, we need Lancaster to act, to do something concrete we can arrest him for. Texts aren't enough. You're the only bait he'll take. Agents will be close, within 30 meters. Audio surveillance, GPS tracking, panic button. But you decide." I had spent 30 years as the man companies hired when they suspected fraud. The analyst who sat in conference rooms reading micro-expressions, voice patterns, the space between what people said and what they meant. And now the FBI wanted me to do it one more time with my life as the stakes. "I'll go," I said. The hotel parking lot was dimly lit, half empty. Vance's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Silver sedan approaching. That's him." The passenger door unlocked. I got in. Conrad Lancaster, 58, with silver hair and the calculated charm of someone who had built a billion-dollar empire on hostile takeovers, drove with one hand, while selling me salvation I knew was poison, a corporate raider who had secretly bet millions that Hoffman's empire would burn. Leather and expensive cologne, tailored suit at 8 p.m. A man who had built an empire on knowing when to strike. He had no idea I had spent 3 decades learning to recognize predators exactly like him. "Mr. Whitfield, thank you for trusting me." "I didn't say I trusted you." He smiled. "Fair enough. Your daughter is a victim of Merritt's manipulation. I have recordings that prove it, but I need that evidence first to protect all of you from Hoffman." Silk voice, boardroom smooth, selling something. "What recordings?" "Phone calls, Merritt threatening Tamara, forcing her to hide evidence. She was terrified, Mr. Whitfield." "Why would Merritt threaten his own wife?" "Because he planned to sell that evidence to the highest bidder. When Tamara discovered his plan, he framed her, made it look like she was the criminal. I watched his hands on the steering wheel, steady, practiced. "Tell me about the Hoffman stock you shorted," I said casually. How much? 15 million, 20, or it's died. His hands tightened for half a second. Enough. I don't know what you mean. You've been shorting Hoffman Development stock for 6 months. Small positions spread across shell companies. When that evidence goes public, Hoffman's stock crashes. You profit. Then you force a merger at dirt cheap prices. Monopolize Florida coastal development. Silence. This isn't about Justice Mr. Lancaster, I continued. This is a hostile takeover disguised as heroism. You're not saving Tamara. You're acquiring evidence worth millions in market manipulation. 10 seconds of silence. I counted. When he spoke again, the silk was gone. You're sharper than I thought, Mr. Whitfield. No denial, just acknowledgement. I made strategic investments, he said carefully. When Hoffman's crimes are exposed, the market will correct itself. I'm on the right side of history. You're on the right side of profit. Perhaps, but we both want to stop Hoffman. We can help each other. How much did you offer Tamara for the evidence? $2.125 million. And when she played you against Hoffman, started a bidding war. His jaw tightened. I protected my investment. By having people killed, Robert Cross, Buxy Finch. I had nothing to do with that. That was Hoffman. He eliminates threats. I'm offering you a way out. The evidence in exchange for protection and money. Everyone walks away. Except Hoffman. Except Hoffman. He goes to prison. His company collapses. The market corrects. Justice is served. And you profit $40 million when his stock crashes. Lancaster smiled. Cold, professional. I prefer to think of it as compensation for public service. Miami highway lights streaked past. I-95 north. I could feel my phone in my pocket. Vance listening to every word FBI agents following 3 cars back. Lancaster had just admitted to stock manipulation, conspiracy, to commit fraud, and attempting to acquire stolen evidence. Now, I had to get him to reveal what he would do to obtain it. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere we can talk privately, without FBI surveillance. He looked at me. You didn't think I'd notice the earpiece, did you? The car accelerated. Vance's voice in my ear went silent, jammed or out of range. Lancaster's smile widened. Your nephew is very good, but I've been evading federal investigation since before he graduated from Quantico. The agents following us, I have people following them. The panic button in your pocket. It pings a frequency I'm blocking. He took an exit I didn't recognize. Dark industrial area, warehouses, no traffic. Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Whitfield. You're going to tell me where that evidence is, all 3 copies, and then you're going to help me retrieve it, because if you don't, I'll make sure your daughter takes the fall for everything. The murders, the fraud, the conspiracy. I have enough documentation to bury her for life. You said you had proof she was innocent. I have proof of whatever I need. He pulled into an empty parking lot, stopped the car. The question is, do you love your daughter enough to save her, even after everything she's done? Outside, 3 black SUVs pulled in behind us. Men in dark suits emerged. Lancaster turned off the engine. Time to choose, Mr. Whitfield. Your daughter's freedom or your principles. You can't have both. Lancaster drove with a cold, triumphant smile, turning his silver sedan west toward Coral Gables. He genuinely believed his signal jammer had cut me off from the world, leaving me completely isolated. He didn't question why I gave up Merritt's address so easily. Greed had blinded him. What he failed to realize was that Vance had anticipated this exact counter-surveillance tactic. The earpiece he jammed was a decoy. My actual tracking device was woven directly into the heavy lining of the leather portfolio I had carried all the way from Singapore, broadcasting on a secure military frequency his scanners couldn't detect. The earpiece jamming? Stuff's expected. The SUVs with Lancaster's men, photographed and tracked. The moment Lancaster revealed his hand, FBI agents had repositioned 3 blocks away, waiting for my next move. I'd told Lancaster the second evidence copy was at Merritt's townhouse. He'd believe me because he wanted to believe, because men like him always think they're the smartest person in the room. Now we were here, quiet Coral Gables Street, brick facade, manicured lawn. The house where Tamara had lived plotted destroyed evidence while her husband slept upstairs. You have the key? Lancaster asked. I pulled it from my pocket. Merritt gave it to me this morning, and he doesn't know we're here. He's at the FBI office, protective custody. Lancaster smiled. Smart. Keep him away from what comes next. I unlocked the front door. The house smelled stale. Unwashed dishes in the sink, mail piled on the counter, evidence of a life interrupted. Basement, I said. For the first time in 2 days, I was not reacting, I was controlling. Every step into that townhouse was deliberate, every word calculated. Lancaster thought he was hunting me. He had no idea he had been caught from the moment he sent that first text message. The basement stairs creaked. Same concrete floor, same water heater in the corner where Merritt and I had found the wipe drive 6 hours ago. Behind the water heater, I said. Panel on the left. Lancaster watched as I knelt, pried open the panel. The hard drive sat in the cavity exactly where we'd left it. I pulled it out, handed it to him. His hands trembled slightly as he took it, eager, hungry. The silk businessman voice was gone. This was pure greed. "This is everything?" he asked. "All of Merritt's documentation, everything he hid here." We went back upstairs. Lancaster set the drive on the kitchen table, pulled out a laptop from his briefcase. Connected the drive. I watched his face, watched the moment hope turned to confusion, confusion to horror. "It's empty," he whispered. "Yes." "Completely wiped." "Yes." He looked at me, and I saw the exact moment he understood. "You knew." I nodded. 6 hours ago. Tamara's smart home administrator account remotely deleted it at 2:47 a.m. 3 days ago, while Merritt slept upstairs. Lancaster's face went white. "Then why bring me here?" "Because I needed to know what you would do when you discovered it was empty." His hand moved toward his vest pocket, very slowly, and I understood we had reached the moment Vance had been waiting for. "Don't," I said quietly. "Before I reveal what happened next, drop your guess in the comments. What do you think Lancaster was reaching for, and what comes next? Keep it to one sentence. Please note, the next part includes some fictionalized details added for emotional impact, though the core truth remains." Lancaster's fingers touched the fabric of his vest pocket. Car doors burst open outside, all 4 sides of the driveway. FBI agents in tactical gear surrounded the house, weapons-drawn voices shouting commands through the windows. It's federal agents' hands where we can see them. It's and it's rand. Lancaster froze, his hand still halfway to his pocket. Vance kicked open the front door, 3 agents behind him. "Conrad Lancaster, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, market manipulation, attempted obstruction of justice, and solicitation of stolen evidence." Vance's voice was cold, professional. "Hands on the table, now!" Lancaster looked at me, pure venom. "You knew from the beginning," he said. "This whole thing was a setup." "I spent 30 years analyzing corporate fraud," I said. "Reading people who lie for profit. You were good, Mr. Lancaster. But I've been doing this since you were buying your first company with Daddy's money." 2 agents handcuffed him, read him his rights. The words blurred together. All I could hear was the click of metal on his wrists, the sound of one predator caught, while another still walked free. They led him out to a waiting FBI vehicle. Vance stayed behind, closing his laptop, where the entire car conversation had been recorded. "We got it all," he said. "Market manipulation admission, the short-selling scheme, attempted acquisition of stolen evidence. His lawyers will argue entrapment, but the recording is clean. You gave him every chance to walk away." "Will it stick?" "It'll stick. SEC has been building their case for months. This gives them everything they need." Vance paused. "He'll cooperate. They always do. He'll flip on Hoffman, on the shell companies, on everyone he's ever bribed or threatened." I should have felt relief, victory, something. Instead, I felt empty. "Uncle Otis." Vance's voice changed, softer, careful. "We got him, everything recorded, but..." He stopped, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "What about Tamara?" The question hung in the humid Miami night air. Lancaster was in handcuffs. He would cooperate, implicate others, save himself. But my daughter, the woman who had orchestrated deaths, manipulated her husband, framed her father, played 2 billionaires against each other for months, was still out there, still coordinating with Hoffman, still believing she could win. "We have evidence," Vance said quietly. "The message history, the offshore account, the surveillance file, the payment records, everything." "Is it enough?" "For an arrest, yes. For a conviction." He hesitated. "She's smart. She'll have lawyers. She'll claim coercion, manipulation, fear for her life. She'll say Hoffman threatened her, that Lancaster forced her, that Merritt was the real mastermind. Will anyone believe her? Does it matter she only needs one juror, one person who looks at a 32-year-old woman and sees a victim instead of a predator?" I stared at the townhouse, the home Tamara and Merritt had built. the place where she'd monitored every device, deleted evidence, remotely staged break-ins to terrorize her own husband. Now, what do we do? I asked. We build the case, get warrants, bring her in for questioning, hope she makes a mistake. Vance put his hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Uncle Otis. I know this isn't the answer you want. It wasn't, but it was the truth. And I had just announced to everyone involved that I knew exactly what she had done. The SEC filing landed on Vance's desk at 6:17 a.m., 3 hours after Lancaster's arrest. Tamara had already rewritten the entire story. I sat in the FBI conference room exhausted. We'd spent the night processing Lancaster's arrest, securing evidence, preparing federal charges. I'd managed maybe 90 minutes of sleep on a conference room couch. Vance walked in holding printouts, his face unreadable. She filed, he said, faced what? Partial confession. SEC Miami office opened at 8:30 a.m. Tamara was waiting at the door when they unlocked it. He spread the documents across the table. Official SEC letterhead, legal language, and at the bottom, my daughter's signature, clear, sharp, unwavering. Vance read aloud, Tamara L. Whitfield hereby confesses to participating in document acquisition under psychological coercion and manipulation by Conrad Lancaster and Merritt Kendrick. Requests immunity consideration in exchange for full cooperation. I stared at the signature. No hesitation, no tremor, the handwriting of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She filed this 3 hours after Lancaster was arrested, I said. 3 hours. She already had it prepared. She knew we would catch him, Vance said quietly. This was ready. Probably sitting in her lawyer's office for days waiting for the right moment. I read further. The filing placed all blame on me and Merritt, claimed Lancaster had psychologically manipulated her, said Merritt had coerced her into taking documents from his computer, portrayed herself as a terrified victim caught between powerful men. Your daughter just accused you of masterminding the entire fraud scheme, Vance said. She's not running, she's fighting, and she's fast. How long had she been preparing these legal filings? Days, weeks. Had she wargamed every possible outcome, every potential arrest, every move we might make while sitting across from Merritt at breakfast, while calling me, crying from Hoffman's office? There's more, Vance said. He pulled out another document. Her lawyer filed an emergency lawsuit 2 hours ago, demanding destruction of all villa camera footage as illegally obtained evidence. I read the filing, violation of state privacy statutes, surreptitious recording without knowledge or consent, fruit of the poisonous tree, all footage inadmissible and must be destroyed immediately. She's claiming she didn't know about the cameras, Vance said. She knew. Can you prove it? I walked to my travel bag in the corner. Inside the leather portfolio I'd carried for 30 years. Financial documents, property records, contracts, everything organized, labeled preserved. Professional habit. Frances used to tease me about it. You keep records like we're preparing for the apocalypse, she'd say. Now I was grateful. I pulled out the villa purchase agreement from July 2009. It was 15 years old, but perfectly preserved in archival plastic. Page 7. I said, sliding it across the table. Security addendum. Vance read aloud, surveillance camera system installed per seller disclosure requirements. All family members granted property access are hereby notified of continuous recording. Written acknowledgement required. I pulled out the second document. Tamara's signed acknowledgement. August 2012. 14 years ago, when she first visited the villa after Frances and I bought it. She knew about the cameras for 12 years, Vance said quietly. She just thought she'd deleted all the footage. She was wrong. Every document I produced felt like removing armor from Frances's memory, exposing our private life, our careful planning, her security measures. But she had installed those cameras, kept those records precisely so they could protect us when she was gone. I was honoring her, not violating her. The FBI attorney took the documents, started preparing responses to Tamara's lawsuit. We broke for lunch. I didn't eat. Just sat in the conference room staring at Miami through the windows, wondering how many more attacks Tamara had prepared. The afternoon session started at 2 p.m. SEC representative FBI attorneys, Vance and me, reviewing Tamara's immunity application, preparing counter-arguments. Then the SEC representative read Tamara's amended statement. The offshore account was established by my late mother, Frances Whitfield, in early 2019 as a family emergency fund. My father has misappropriated these funds for personal use and falsely claimed they were created through fraud. The room went silent. It was plausible. Frances had been financially sophisticated. She could have set up offshore accounts. If no one checked the dates carefully, if no one knew her medical history, the story might work. But I knew. "May I request a brief recess?" I asked. My voice was steady. "I have medical documentation that contradicts this claim." The SEC representative nodded. I opened my laptop, the files I'd maintained for 30 years, electronic medical records, hospital documents, treatment summaries. Everything encrypted, backed up, preserved. Another professional habit. When Frances got sick, I documented everything. Every diagnosis, every treatment, every doctor's note. Partly for insurance, partly because I couldn't accept I was losing her. And keeping records made me feel like I had some control. I pulled up the file. Jackson Memorial Hospital, March through August 2019. Frances Whitfield. I said, "Admitted Jackson Memorial, March 12, 2019. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Diagnosis confirmed March 14th. Medically induced coma, March 15th to manage pain." I turned the laptop screen toward them. Intensive care continuously until death on August 3rd, 2019. Medical records show she was physically and mentally incapable of conducting any financial transactions from mid-March onward. The SEC representative leaned forward reading the dates. "The offshore account Tamara claims my wife created," I continued. "It was opened July 15th, 2024, 5 years after Frances died, 4 months ago. I pulled up Frances's photo, the one from the medical file, not the hospital photo. I couldn't look at those. The intake photo from 20 years earlier when she'd first established care at Jackson Memorial. Smiling, healthy, beautiful. I closed the laptop. The meeting room went silent. The SEC representative stared at the medical records printout Vance had made. The dates, the continuous care documentation, the death certificate. "I'll forward these to Tamara's legal counsel," the representative said quietly. Vance looked at me with something close to respect, or maybe pity. I couldn't tell anymore. Tamara's lawyer would receive these records within the hour, and my daughter would know that every lie she constructed, every false claim she manufactured, I could dismantle with the evidence Frances and I had spent a lifetime building. The cameras, the contracts, the medical records, the careful documentation of 30 years analyzing fraud. All of it had been preparation for a war I never wanted to fight. "What happens now?" I asked Vance. "Now we wait," he said. "See what she does next." But I knew Tamara wasn't done. She still had moves left. Evidence wasn't the same as justice. And my daughter still had one more card to play. The question Vance asked at midnight was simple. Do you want to turn Hoffman against Tamara, or let them both burn together? We sat in the FBI conference room, the only ones left. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. Outside the windows, Miami was dark except for scattered office buildings, where other people worked through the night on cases that would ruin other families. "What do you mean, waste?" I asked. Vance pulled up files from the third container, the one from the bank. "We have evidence that Tamara betrayed Hoffman. While she was negotiating with him taking his money, she was also transferring his confidential business information to Lancaster." He showed me a document. Client transfer log. Hundreds of names, Hoffman Development Group's entire VIP portfolio, every high net worth client, every property in development, every deal in progress, all sent to Lancaster's private email. "She played them both," Vance said. "But Hoffman doesn't know yet. His arrest warrant is being prepared. He'll go down for everything Merritt documented. But if we show him this first show, him that Tamara sold him out to his biggest competitor, he'll turn on her," I finished. Vance nodded. "Criminals hate being played, sometimes more than they hate prison." I stared at the document. 30 years analyzing risk had taught me this. Sometimes the best weapon against one predator is another predator. Hoffman and Tamara had used each other. Now I was using them both. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like orchestrating a demolition where my daughter was the building. "Send it," I said. "Send Hoffman this page, the client transfer log. Show him that, while he was negotiating with Tamara, she was giving Lancaster his entire VIP portfolio." Vance made the call. Hoffman's attorney, private communication, one document, strategic. We waited. 2 hours later, at 2:17 a.m., Vance's phone rang. "This is Special Agent Caldwell," he answered. Then his expression changed. He grabbed a pen, started writing. "Yes, sir. We're very interested in what your client has to offer." He listened for 3 minutes, asked questions, took notes. "I'll need to consult with the U.S. Attorney's Office, but preliminary discussion is possible. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., bring everything." He hung up, looked at me. Hoffman was turning out to be deeper in this protective web than we initially analyzed. His reach extended straight into the federal judiciary, using systemic real estate assets to manipulate active courtroom tracks before the FBI's core evidence could even be presented to a jury. In exchange for what I asked: consideration in federal sentencing, cooperation credit. He knows he's going down. He wants to bring her down with him. "He's a criminal," I said quietly. But Tamara betrayed him the same way she betrayed everyone else. And criminals hate being played more than anyone. Vance pulled up the file transfer Hoffman's attorney had sent as proof of good faith. Audio files, hundreds of them, organized by date, February through October 2024. The audio file icon sat on Vance's laptop screen. 8 months of recordings, hundreds of hours. And somewhere in that digital archive was the sound of my daughter becoming someone who could laugh about manipulating her father. "Do you want to hear them now?" Vance asked. "Or wait until tomorrow?" I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. I'd been awake for nearly 24 hours. My eyes burned. My head ached. "The one," I said. "Play one." Vance clicked the earliest file. February 14th, 2024. 8 months ago. The day after Valentine's Day. The first conversation after Tamara agreed to work with Hoffman. Static, then voices. Hoffman's voice, first professional. "The documentation Merritt compiled is comprehensive, but your husband will notice it's missing eventually." Then came Tamara's voice. Clear, cold, clinical. The exact audio that matched the chills I felt reviewing the security tapes. "He still thinks I'm his little girl. His inferiority complex blinds people." You could hear the sharp, mocking smile in her voice, a small, chilling laugh, light, almost playful. "He has been running from grief for 5 years, making him incredibly easy to manipulate." Hoffman's voice cut in. "And your father, that same problem," Tamara replied instantly. "Worse, actually. He's been in Singapore this whole time. Don't call, don't visit. Just sending money like that fixes anything. When he finally comes back, if he ever comes back, he'll be so desperate for forgiveness, he won't see what's right in front of him." "Turn it off," I said. Vance reached for the laptop. His hand stopped. "You need to hear the context." "I heard enough." He closed the file. The conference room went silent. Just the hum of fluorescent lights. The distant sound of traffic 18 floors below. "She was half right," I said finally. "I did leave her. I did run. And somewhere in those 5 years, the daughter I left behind became someone I don't recognize. That's on me too." "Uncle Otis?" "No," I held up a hand. "She chose to do what she did. She chose to help kill people to frame me, to manipulate Merritt. Those are her choices. But I gave her the anger to fuel it. I left her alone with grief when she needed me most. Frances died and I ran 8,000 miles away because I couldn't face the house we built, the life we shared, the daughter who had her mother's eyes." Vance was quiet for a long time. "What Frances would want," he said carefully, "is for you to stop Tamara from hurting more people. That's what matters now." "I know." But knowing didn't make it easier. Vance stood. "I'm going to get coffee. You need anything?" "No." He left, closing the door softly behind him, giving me space. I stood at the conference room window, staring at Miami's 3 a.m. skyline office buildings, lit with lonely fluorescence, the bay dark beyond them. Frances's voice came to me across 5 years. Never leave without looking back. I had left. I had not looked back. And when I finally returned, I found a daughter who had spent 5 years watching me from 8,000 miles away, cataloging my absence, transforming it into a weapon. The audio file sat on Vance's laptop. Tomorrow, we would hear the rest. All the evidence we needed to convict her. Every word she'd said. Every plan she'd made. Every person she'd helped destroy. All in her own voice. And I would have to sit there and listen to my daughter condemn herself. The FBI digital forensics expert froze the deepfake video at frame 847. We already knew it was fabricated. Vance had confirmed it within hours of my arrival. But knowing it and proving it in federal court were different standards entirely. What I needed now was irrefutable scientific proof that would hold up under the scrutiny of a defense attorney. Morning came too fast. After only 2 hours of sleep, a rush of black coffee and a clean shirt, I was back at it. By 10 a.m., we were standing inside the digital forensics lab, surrounded by glowing screens covering every wall. The expert was mid-30s FBI technical division. She pulled up the KYC verification video, showing my face opening the offshore account. A-frame 847, she said, pointing. See the eyelid movement? Humans blink asymmetrically. One eyelid closes fractionally before the other. Deepfakes generate perfectly symmetrical blinks. Machine learning artifact. She advanced the video. Same issue frame 1203154428891. Consistent deepfake signature. Is Poe... How confident? Vance asked. 100%. This won't survive 10 minutes of expert testimony. Add the lighting angle mismatch background shows indoor office lighting at 4,000. Kelvin face is lit at 5,500 Kelvin. Different room. Face composited onto background. I had spent 30 years analyzing systems, finding weaknesses, identifying fraud. But Frances had built systems that survived her death, that anticipated attacks she would never see. I had been the analyst. She had been the architect. The IP address that initiated this KYC call, the expert continued pulling up network logs. Traced to Caldwell Investment Suite, 184, O Brickell Avenue, Tamara Whitfield's office. Timestamp, July 15, 2024, 2:47 p.m. Vance checked building security records. Her keycard swiped in at 2:31 p.m. same day. She was physically present when this video was created and transmitted. She left a trail a first-year analyst could follow, Vance said quietly. I stared at the frozen frame. Not my face. A copy. Good enough to fool automated systems. Not good enough to fool experts. Is there anything else? Vance asked. I pulled my laptop from my bag. 15 years old. Frances's encrypted files, system documentation, network logs. Vance, I need to show you something my wife built. I opened the file. 15 years of network security logs from the villa. Every device that had ever connected to our Wi-Fi. Every access attempt. Every login. Every failure. Frances hadn't just installed cameras. She'd built comprehensive network security. After the 2004 break-in attempt, she'd spent 6 months designing defenses. Every device attempting to connect is logged, I explained. MAC address timestamp access attempts. Dual-factor authentication required for system changes. I scrolled to August 2024. August 19th, 2024, 11:37 p.m. Unknown device, attempts administrator log in to the camera system. Vance read the log over my shoulder. Attempt 1, admin login failed invalid credentials. Attempt 2, admin login failed dual-factor authentication required. Attempt 3, forced deletion and protocol initiated. System response, dual-factor block engaged. Deletion prevented. Unknown device, MAC address captured. A483E72BF1C9. She tried to delete the footage that night, I said. After they painted the walls white after hiding the evidence. Tamara came back, tried to erase everything remotely. But Frances's system stopped her, Vance said, and logged the device that tried. I pulled up carrier registration records, cross-referenced MAC addresses. Perfect match. A483E72BF1C9 Tamara L. Whitfield, iPhone 14, Pro registered to personal account. She was there that night, I said. At the villa, physically present, trying to delete everything, and Frances's system built 15 years ago caught her, stopped her, preserved everything. The forensics expert examined the logs. This is irrefutable. MAC addresses are unique hardware identifiers. She can't claim someone else used her phone. Carrier records prove ownership. Timestamp places her at the villa the exact night walls were painted. Vance stared at the screen. Your wife saved all of you, Uncle Otis, he said quietly. 15 years ago, she built a system that would catch your daughter trying to destroy evidence in 2024. She knew. Somehow she knew someone might try this someday. I looked at Frances's photo on my phone, her smile, her eyes that saw through people, through lies, through time. She was a cybersecurity expert, I said. She spent 40 years anticipating attacks, building defenses, trust people but verify everything. She trusted Tamara, but she verified. The The camera's dual-factor authentication network logs. Vance shook his head. Most people install a Ring doorbell. Your wife built a fortress. She was protecting us from threats outside, I said. She never imagined the threat would come from inside, from our daughter. But she'd caught her anyway. The system didn't care who breached it. It just caught them, logged them, preserved the evidence. The forensics expert compiled everything into a report. Deepfake analysis, IP trace, MAC address match, carrier records, network logs. This is the strongest digital evidence chain I've seen in 15 years at the Bureau, she said. Every piece confirms every other piece. No gaps, no ambiguity. Vance stood. We need to brief the U.S. attorney. This changes everything. I looked at the screen surrounding us. My daughter's crimes laid out in frames and timestamps and MAC addresses. Caught by her mother's ghost. Stopped by a woman dead for 5 years, but still protecting her family from beyond the grave. Frances was always 3 steps ahead of everyone, I said quietly. Even me, even Tamara, especially Tamara. Vance put his hand on my shoulder. She would be proud of you, for coming back, for fighting. She would be heartbroken, I said. About Tamara, about what she became. But she'd still want justice, Vance said. She built these systems for a reason. I closed my laptop. Frances's final gift, her last protection, the evidence that would convict our daughter. And somehow, I had to find the strength to use it. The question I should have asked when Judge Bentley postponed the trial was not why, but how much Tamara paid her. I used Frances's evidence, submitted it to the U.S. attorney, watched prosecutors build their case with the MAC address logs, the deepfake analysis, the audio recordings. Every piece of proof my wife had preserved or anticipated. Then 5 days before trial, the postponement order arrived. Vance read it aloud in the FBI conference room, his voice tight with anger. Judge Bentley cites insufficient evidence for trial to proceed. Insufficient, after everything we've compiled. Judge Verna Bentley, 52, and appointed to the federal bench just 6 months earlier, announced an indefinite trial postponement, citing insufficient evidence until Dwight discovered the 50,000 stock options her brother-in-law received from a shell company registered at Tamara's law office. How, I asked, how is the evidence insufficient? It's not, Vance said. This is corruption. He called Dwight. 3 hours later, the forensic accountant walked in, carrying his laptop and the expression of someone who'd found exactly what he was looking for. Shell Corporation registered in Delaware, October 18th. Dwight said, pulling up records. Beneficial owner Harold Bentley, the judge's brother-in-law, received 50,000 stock options in KLM Holdings 3 days ago. He turned the screen. Registered agent address, 1840 Brickell Avenue, Suite 12. That's Tamara's law office building. How many people had Tamara corrupted? How deep did her network extend? A judge, Hoffman's associates, shell companies spanning 3 states. For a 32-year-old woman, she had built an infrastructure of fraud that would impress criminals twice her age and experience. Send it, I said. Federal Judicial Oversight Board, tonight. Vance compiled the evidence package, stock options, corporate registration, address match, timeline showing the bribe occurred 48 hours before the postponement order. I hit send at 11 p.m. Vance called me at 2:17 a.m. The judge has been suspended pending investigation, he said. New judge assigned, trial starts December 2nd. We won Uncle Otis. Another round. I hung up and stared at the ceiling of my hotel room. Another round, another battle. Tamara kept fighting, kept corrupting, kept trying to escape. And I kept having to dismantle her defenses one by one. The next morning, FBI agents located Merritt. He'd checked into a small Fort Lauderdale hotel under a false name after his escort vehicle was intercepted. Been hiding for 5 days because he didn't know who to trust. They brought him to the FBI office. He looked thinner, exhausted, haunted. But when he saw me, his face changed. Are you okay, Dad? The question was simple, the concern genuine. This man my daughter had terrorized still worried about me. I will be better after next week, I said. After we tell the truth, after justice. Merritt nodded. I didn't know if I could trust anyone. I thought if I disappeared, they couldn't use me against you. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. We stood there, 2 men who had been strangers 6 years ago, now bound by betrayal and survival. 2 months passed between evidence compilation and trial. 2 months of legal preparation, witness coaching, evidence cataloging. 2 months of me not returning to the villa, not confronting the white walls, not facing what had happened there, until tonight. The night before I would see Tamara in court. I drove to Isla Morada in late afternoon. The villa looked the same from outside coral exterior palm trees the bay beyond, but inside the white walls remained, unpainted, unrepaired, evidence preserved for trial. I didn't go inside, couldn't. Instead, I sat on the front porch where Francis and I used to watch sunsets. December in Florida, warm breeze, stars emerging over the dark bay, waves crashing against the shore with their endless rhythm. I remembered Tamara at age 8, right here on this beach, 4th of July. I'd put her on my shoulders so she could see the fireworks better. Higher, Daddy. I want to see the fireworks better. And all fin da. Her weight on my shoulders, her hands gripping my head, her laughter pure and uncomplicated. She'd pointed at every burst of color, naming them red, blue, gold, green, her voice full of wonder. That was the daughter I remembered, the daughter I'd left behind. Somewhere in 5 years of my absence, that innocent child had transformed into a woman who orchestrated the hunt for her own father, who helped kill investigators, who corrupted judges, who built an empire of fraud while I was 8,000 miles away. Where exactly did the transformation happen? What day? What moment? When did grief turn to anger? Anger to calculation, calculation to crime. Francis, tell me where I went wrong, I whispered to the darkness. The waves answered with their endless rhythm. No absolution there. But I knew the answer, had known it since I heard Tamara's voice on that recording, cold, clinical, laughing about manipulating the father who abandoned her, the daughter he left behind. She'd been half right, more than half. I had left her. I'd run. 8,000 miles and 5 years of running from grief, because I couldn't face the house we built, the life we shared, the daughter who had her mother's eyes. Francis died, and I fled. Left Tamara alone with her grief, with her anger, with her questions about why her father couldn't stay. And in that space, that 5-year absence, she'd transformed into someone I didn't recognize. She chose to do what she did. She chose to help kill people to frame me, to manipulate merit. Those were her choices, her crimes. But I gave her the anger to fuel it. I gave her the abandonment to weaponize. I gave her 5 years of absence to fill with whatever darkness she could find. That was on me, too. The Florida Keys sky began to lighten in the east, dawn coming, trial day approaching. I would walk into a federal courtroom and testify against my daughter. I would tell the truth about what she had done, the evidence, the crimes, the calculated evil. But I would also carry the truth about what I had failed to do. Stay, grieve with her, be present when she needed a father most. I stood turned to look at the villa, the white walls visible through the windows, evidence of her crime, reminder of my failure. Both our crimes, really, hers of commission, mine of omission. The white wall behind me stood as evidence of both. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor of the Ferguson Federal Courthouse, and I stepped out into a corridor that smelled of recycled air and old carpet, the particular institutional smell of a building where consequential things happened every day until they stopped being remarkable to the people who worked there. December 2nd, 2024. 6 weeks since the night I had run through mangroves in October, heat carrying a metal container while Rufus Yates shouted for backup behind me. That night felt like something that had happened to a different man. In a way, it had. The man who had stepped off a flight from Singapore that afternoon had been running from a house, from a memory, from a daughter he had not faced in 5 years. The man who rode this elevator upward had spent 6 weeks inside federal proceedings, learning the precise shape of everything that daughter had built in his absence. I had not seen Tamara in person since the courthouse depositions in November, where she had appeared briefly for procedural matters and sat with her attorneys without looking toward the gallery. That encounter had lasted 11 minutes. I had counted. Today would last considerably longer. Merritt was already in the corridor when I arrived, seated on one of the wooden benches that lined the wall outside courtroom 4B. He wore a charcoal suit, conservative in the way that people dress when they understand the day requires something from them. He had lost weight over the previous weeks in a way that read less as illness than as reduction. Everything unnecessary stripped away, what remained clarified. He stood when he saw me, and we shook hands rather than embracing, which was accurate to what we had become, two people bound by a specific experience, not yet anything that required a warmer word. "Vance is inside already," he said. "They let the FBI team take their seats early." I nodded, looked at the courtroom door. "You testified at depositions for 3 weeks," I said. "How did it feel?" Merritt considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Like explaining arithmetic," he said finally. "The facts were clear. I just had to say them in the right order. Today is different." Today the jury hears it. We went inside. The courtroom was fuller than I had expected for an opening session. Media credentials in the back rows, print journalists and legal correspondents, no cameras permitted. A cluster of FBI agents from the Miami field office, including the digital forensics analyst, who had frozen the deepfake video at frame 847 and explained eyelid asymmetry to a room full of federal prosecutors. Dwight Long, the forensic accountant, sat near the aisle with a briefcase that I understood contained 8 months of reconstructed financial architecture. 2 rows of legal observers from the SEC, who had their own parallel proceedings pending, and were watching this trial the way a surgeon watches a colleague operate on a shared patient. The defendant's table was on my left as I entered. 3 chairs, 3 attorneys. 3 defendants seated in the precise arrangement of people who had arrived separately and would, if their respective legal strategies were followed, continue to move in increasingly divergent directions. Hoffman sat closest to the jury box. 62 years old, silver-haired, the specific physical composure of someone who had spent decades in rooms where other people were nervous, and he was not. His attorney was a Miami firm partner whose billing rate I recognized from federal case disclosures, the kind of representation you retained when you had both the resources and the intention to fight every count. Lancaster sat in the middle chair, separated from Hoffman by perhaps 18 inches, and a silence that held considerably more than physical distance. They had not looked at each other since October. Hoffman's cooperation with federal prosecutors had been strategically precise enough to earn sentencing consideration, targeted directly at the counts Lancaster was most exposed on. Lancaster's attorneys had filed 3 motions to exclude that testimony. All 3 had been denied. Tamara sat at the far end of the table. Dark suit, charcoal rather than black, the kind of choice that read as serious without being funereal. Hair pinned back, hands folded on the table in front of her. She had not turned around when I entered, and she did not turn around now. Her posture was completely contained the way certain people hold themselves when they have decided that the only thing they can control in a room is their own presentation. I took my seat in the gallery beside Vance. He had coffee in a paper cup and a legal notepad already open, covered in the small, dense handwriting he used when he was thinking faster than he was writing. He glanced over as I sat down. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Ask me at the end of the day," I said. He nodded and turned back to his notes. The judge entered at 8:51 a.m. The replacement judge, practical, methodical, a federal bench veteran who had handled the Bentley recusal with the brisk efficiency of someone who had seen judicial misconduct before and found it tedious rather than shocking. She arranged her papers and looked at the room with the expression of a person who intended to move through the day at a pace that reflected the court's calendar rather than anyone's emotional state. "Good morning," she said. "We are here today for the trial of United States versus Hoffman, Lancaster, and Whitfield. Before we bring in the jury, I want to confirm that all parties have reviewed the evidence stipulations filed last week. Any objections?" The attorneys conferred briefly with their clients and indicated no objections in sequence. Tamara's attorney, a woman in her 50s whom I had researched and found to have a record of successful coercion defense arguments in complex fraud cases, spoke last. Her voice was measured. She had been preparing this case for 11 weeks. The jury filed in at 9:17. 12 people, 4 alternates. The compressed variety of a federal jury pool drawn from Miami-Dade and surrounding counties' ages ranging from early 30s to mid-70s backgrounds that would not be disclosed but could be partially inferred from bearing and dress. They had been selected over 2 days the previous week, a process I had watched from the gallery with the specific attention of someone who understood that these 12 individuals would ultimately determine whether 65 people employed by Hoffman Development Corporation, 2 men who had died before this trial, began, 1 son-in-law who had spent months in terror, and 1 father who had run through a mangrove swamp in October. Darkness would receive anything resembling a coherent accounting. I watched them settle, Watch them look at the defendant's table with the careful neutrality of people who had been instructed to reserve judgment and were to varying degrees managing that instruction. The prosecutor stood. Elena Vasquez, Assistant U.S., attorney 39 years old, had spent the previous 11 weeks turning everything Merritt had documented, everything Francis's cameras had preserved, and everything Dwight had traced across 4 layers of shell corporations into a narrative that could be followed by 12 people who had not spent their careers inside international financial risk analysis. I had watched her work during the deposition phase and understood why Vance had said quietly and only once that she was the best trial attorney in the Miami field office. She did not begin with financial figures or offshore account numbers or wire transfer dates. She began with a question. What does it mean to trust someone? The courtroom was quiet. We trust people every day without thinking about it. We trust that the car coming toward us in the opposite lane will stay on its side of the road. We trust that the numbers on a financial statement reflect real transactions. We trust that the people who share our homes and our names are at a minimum not actively working to destroy us. She paused. This case is about what happens when that trust is weaponized. When someone who had access to every part of a person's life, his home, his financial identity, his documents, his absence used the access not to protect him, but to construct a trap designed to end his freedom and eliminate any threat to her own plans. She turned toward the jury and laid out in plain language and precise sequence the architecture of what had been built over 8 months. The offshore account opened in my name, using deepfake video verification, the evidence planted in my villa with my identifying documents surrounding it to ensure that discovery would implicate me rather than the person who placed it there. The stage break-ins at Merritt's townhouse designed to terrify him into hiding the evidence exactly where she needed it. The remote deletion of the backup drive at 2:47 in the morning while Merritt slept 3 rooms away. The phone calls from Hoffman's executive suite performed with tears while her father ran through title flats. 43 counts for Hoffman, 12 for Lancaster, 18 for Tamara. Vasquez named each category of charge clearly and connected it to the evidence that would support it. She did not editorialize. She did not ask the jury to feel anything in particular. She simply laid out what had happened in order and indicated that the evidence they were about to hear would confirm each element. When she sat down, I looked at Tamara. My daughter had not moved during the opening statement. Her hands remained folded. Her posture remained contained. She was looking at a point slightly forward and to her left, not at the jury, not at the prosecutor, not at the gallery. A fixed point that allowed her to appear attentive without engaging with anything in the room. I recognized that quality. Francis had described it in me once during an argument I had mostly lost as the ability to be physically present in a conversation while being entirely elsewhere. She had not meant it as a compliment. The defense opening statements followed. Hoffman's attorney argued government overreach and selective prosecution. Lancaster's attorney argued entrapment and disputed the admissibility of Hoffman's cooperation as testimony on 4 separate grounds. Both arguments were well-constructed, technically competent, and unlikely to survive contact with what was coming in the evidence phase. Tamara's attorney stood last. Tamara Whitfield is 32 years old, she said. She lost her mother 5 years ago to a brutal illness after a 4-month decline that required around-the-clock care. Within 3 weeks of her mother's death, her father left the country and did not return for 5 years. He did not call regularly, he did not visit. He sent money. She paused. I am not here to excuse what my client did. She made choices during this period that were wrong, and that she acknowledges were wrong. But the government's narrative that Tamara Whitfield was the mastermind, the architect, the coldly calculating criminal who planned every element of this scheme erases the context in which those choices were made. A young woman alone, grieving abandoned by the only parent she had left, was approached by Stuart Hoffman 18 months ago with a proposition. She made a terrible decision, but terrible decisions made under pressure by people who have been left without support are not the same as premeditated criminal enterprise. The courtroom was quiet. I looked at Merritt. He was watching Tamara's attorney with an expression I could not fully interpret, not agreement, not dismissal, something more complicated. He had spent 6 years inside this story from a different position than mine. He knew things about those 18 months that I did not. The opening statements concluded at 11:42 a.m. The judge called a brief recess before the first witness. I stayed in my seat while the gallery moved around me. Vance stepped into the aisle to confer with Vasquez's team. Merritt remained beside me, both of us watching the defendant's table, where attorneys were speaking in low voices to their clients. Tamara sat with her head slightly inclined toward her attorney, listening. Whatever was being said, she received it without visible reaction. Then she sat back, looked straight ahead, and was still. She did not look toward the gallery. The recess ended. The judge returned. The first witness was called. Merritt Kendrick took the stand at 12:04 p.m., was sworn in, and looked out at a courtroom that would spend the next 3 days understanding in careful detail what it had cost him to sit in that chair. I watched my daughter's back as Merritt began to speak. She did not move. 12 people in the jury box watched and listened, and the work of 11 weeks and 5 years, and the entire terrible arithmetic of this family began finally to be read aloud into the public record. There was nothing left to do but hear it. The moment the judge settled into her chair, the courtroom went quiet in the particular way that courtrooms do when something irreversible is about to happen. Not the quiet of an empty room, but the quiet of people holding themselves still against the weight of what comes next. February 19th, 2025. The Ferguson Federal Courthouse, Miami, 10th floor, courtroom 4B. I had been sitting in this same gallery seat for 11 weeks. The wood had shaped itself to my posture, or perhaps I had shaped myself to the wood. Either way, I no longer shifted. I simply sat and waited and watched the 3 people at the defendant's table, who had caused more damage than I could fully account for, not just to evidence and institutions and financial records, but to the specific texture of my life that I would never recover. Hoffman sat nearest the aisle, Lancaster beside him. Tamara at the far end, her back to the gallery, hair pinned the way Frances used to pin hers on days that required precision. I had not spoken to my daughter since the day I hung up on her call from Hoffman's office. That was 120 days ago. The judge, the replacement judge appointed after Bentley's suspension, arranged her papers without ceremony. She was 60 practical in her movements, the kind of jurist who had spent decades watching families destroy each other across courtroom floors, and had developed neither contempt nor sentimentality about it. She simply applied the law. I found that quality in this moment more reassuring than anything else I could have asked for. "Will the defendants please rise?" They stood, all 3. Tamara rose last unhurried, smoothing the front of her jacket, the way she had done before piano recitals when she was 12 years old. That muscle memory reaching through everything across all the years and all the choices still present in her hands. Stuart Hoffman. The judge read without inflection. The jury finds you guilty on 43 counts, including wire fraud, bribery of public officials, environmental falsification, and money laundering. This court will proceed to sentencing on April 15th. Hoffman received this the way he had received every other setback in his career, without visible reaction, as though it had happened to someone standing slightly behind him. His attorney placed a steadying hand on his forearm. Hoffman did not acknowledge it. Conrad Lancaster. The jury finds you guilty on 12 counts including securities fraud, stock manipulation, and criminal conspiracy. Lancaster turned his head toward Hoffman, a long look. What moved across his face in that moment was not grief or fear, but a specific focused fury, the fury of a man who understood that Hoffman's cooperation testimony had sealed 12 of those counts. He had been outmaneuvered by a criminal he had spent 8 months trying to destroy. The irony of it would occupy him for years. He would have a great deal of time for that. Tamara Whitfield. The courtroom shifted. Not physically, no one moved, but something in the air changed the way pressure changes before a storm, while the sky still looks clear. I watched my daughter's shoulders. She held them absolutely level. 11 weeks in that chair, and she had never once let them drop, never once allowed her posture to suggest the weight she was carrying. Whatever I had failed to teach her, I had apparently taught her that. Or Frances had. Or she had taught herself during 5 years of absence when there was no one to lean on. The jury finds you guilty on 18 counts, including identity theft, conspiracy to defraud into financial institutions, evidence tampering, and wire fraud. I counted the seconds between the verdict and any response from her. I reached 6 before she moved. She turned around, not partially, not a glance over her shoulder. She turned fully in her chair and looked directly at me across the gallery with an expression I had spent 11 weeks preparing for and still could not read with any certainty. It was not the cold precision I had seen on the security footage directing strangers through my living room. It was not the performed anguish I had heard on the phone call from Hoffman's office. It was something else, something that had no convenient category the way certain truths resist the words we try to put on them. She held that look for 3 or 4 seconds. Then she said clearly enough that the people around me could hear it, "This is the result of 5 years of your absence." No accusation in her voice, no plea. The tone of someone closing an account, recording a final entry, ensuring the ledger showed both columns accurately before it was sealed. The marshals moved toward her. She faced forward and let them lead her out without looking back. I sat with what she had said, while the room began to empty around me, journalists moving toward the exits, legal observers gathering their materials, FBI agents exchanging the compressed acknowledgments of people who had just finished a long and complicated thing. Vance appeared at my side. He did not speak immediately. He was trained among other things to know when silence served better than words. When the courtroom had mostly cleared, he said quietly, "Ready." "Not yet," I said. "Give me a minute." He moved to the aisle, waited. I sat in the empty gallery and looked at the defendant's table. 3 chairs, all empty now. The yellow legal pads with their careful notes, the water glasses, the neat stacks of documents, all the materials of a defense that had ultimately failed. Tamara's chair faced slightly outward from where she had turned to look at me. No one had straightened it. She had been right. I knew that in the way that certain knowledge arrives, not as a revelation, but as a confirmation of something you have understood for some time and have simply been unwilling to finalize. I had left. Francis died, and I booked a flight, and I did not look back not once in 5 years, because looking back would have required me to see what I was leaving behind. A 32-year-old woman who had her mother's eyes and her mother's habit of going still when she was thinking, standing in the doorway of a house that smelled of illness and loss, watching her father choose distance over presence because presence had become unbearable. I had made that calculation. I had calculated that my own grief outweighed her need for a father, and I had been wrong. Not in the way of minor errors that correct themselves wrong, in the way that changes the shape of everything that follows. That did not make her choices my responsibility. Merritt's testimony had been unambiguous. The evidence had been methodical and complete. What she had done was hers alone. The planning, the manipulation, the careful architecture of harm she had built over 8 months. She had chosen every step. I had not chosen them for her, but I had given her the anger to start. Vance was still waiting at the aisle. Beyond the courtroom doors, I could hear the ordinary sounds of a building returning to its routine voices, footsteps, the distant closing of an elevator, the world continuing indifferent to the specific devastation of this particular morning. I stood, straightened my jacket, walked out. The February light hit us at the top of the courthouse steps, with the particular force of South Florida winter sun, warm and direct, the sky a flat, clear blue that offered no shade. After 11 weeks of fluorescent interiors, it required adjustment. I stood on the top step and let my eyes adapt. Merritt waited below at the bottom of the stairs. He had not entered the courtroom for the verdict. There was nothing for him there that he did not already know, and some thresholds are better declined. He stood with his hands in his coat pockets watching the street until he heard us and turned. His face asked the question. Vance nodded once. Merritt received that and was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me. "How are you?" "Standing," I said, which was accurate. Vance descended the steps. "I need to debrief with the prosecution team. 30 minutes. He checked his watch. "There's a diner 2 blocks north. Meet me there." He went back inside. Merritt and I walked down to the sidewalk and stood in the February warmth without any immediate need to fill the space between us with words. That was something we had learned over 11 weeks and 3 weeks of scraping paint in Islamorada, that silence between people who have survived the same thing does not require management. After a while, Merritt said, "Vance mentioned the consulting offer, FBI financial crimes. Are you considering it?" "I think so." He looked at the street. "I spent 6 months documenting Hoffman's entire operation. I know how those structures work, what they look like from the inside." A pause. "Might as well use it for something." "That Francis would call that converting a loss into a resource," I said. He almost smiled. "I've been thinking about her a lot since the letter." I had told him the content of her letter the evening we found it sitting on the porch while the bay darkened. It had seemed right that he should know not the private words, but the fact of it, that she had hidden something in 2009 for a year she could not name, trusting the house to hold it. That she had understood 15 years in advance what the people she loved would eventually need. "She built a system that caught Tamara," Merritt said. She hid a letter that found you. She spent 40 years building things that would outlast her. He looked at me. Most people just live their lives. She was always constructing something. She said once that security was just architecture. I told him. You build the right structures and they protect you after you stop watching. We were quiet again. Somewhere behind us inside the building, a marriage that had lasted 6 years and cost both of them more than either could have anticipated was now a matter of federal record. The legal dissolution would come later, separate proceedings, more paperwork. But the real ending had happened here in a courtroom, with a verdict and a turned chair, and 8 words spoken across a gallery. A taxi passed, a delivery truck. A woman pushing a stroller, moving quickly, paying no attention to the 2 men standing in front of the federal courthouse, processing the particular arithmetic of what family costs. She looked at me, I said. Before the marshals took her, she turned around and looked directly at me. Merritt was quiet for a moment. What did you see? I considered the question honestly, the way Francis had always required me to consider things. I would rather have answered quickly. I don't know, I said finally. Something that didn't have a name. Something that was still deciding what it was. He nodded. That might be enough. I wasn't certain he was right, but I was not certain he was wrong either. And there was a version of going forward that did not require certainty, only the willingness to remain present for whatever came next, regardless of whether it resolved into something recognizable. Vance would be back in 20 minutes. The diner was 2 blocks north. The drive back to Isla Mirada was 2.5 hours. The same route Francis and I had driven every Sunday, the bridges over the same water. I had watched from the dock the night I first called 911 and started this long unwinding. I had a letter on the kitchen counter addressed and sealed, waiting to be mailed to a federal facility in Miami. She might not read it, but I had written it and sealed it and addressed it with her legal name and registration number because that was what staying looked like from the inside. Not grand gestures, not speeches, not the performance of redemption, but the ordinary repeated acts of a person who has decided to remain. A letter written, coffee made, paint scraped, one more day in the house. Ready? Merritt asked. Yes, I said. We walked north toward the diner in the February warmth, 2 blocks at a time. The scraper hit bare plaster at an angle, and I had to stop, reposition, begin again. 3 weeks had passed since the verdict. 3 weeks of Merritt and me working through the villa, room by room, floor to ceiling, removing everything Tamara had applied that night in August. The white paint peeled in long strips, sometimes in small, reluctant flakes, other times depending on how many coats she had used. In the living room, she had been thorough. In the hallway, she had rushed, and the coral beneath came back almost without effort. That difference told me something. She had cared more about the living room, the place where we gathered as a family. She wanted that room gone most. I thought about that as I scraped. Merritt had arrived on the 3rd day after the verdict. I had not invited him, but I had not been surprised either. He drove down from Fort Lauderdale with 2 bags and a look about him like a man who had nowhere else to go and had finally made peace with that fact. We exchanged no elaborate discussion about arrangements or terms. He took the guest room. In the mornings, he made coffee and left mine on the counter before I came downstairs. By mid-morning, we were working. It was a reasonable way to begin something new. He was quieter than I expected. In the FBI offices during those urgent weeks in October and November, he had been frightened and verbose, talking to fill silence the way nervous people do. Now, he said little. He worked with steady attention, the kind of focus a man develops when he has decided that the task in front of him is the only thing that deserves his energy. I recognized it because Francis had described the same quality in me years ago, when she said I analyzed problems the way surgeons operated: no wasted motion, no conversation, no doubt until it was done. That is not always a kindness, she had told me. People around you need more than competence. She had been right. I had filed that observation away and not acted on it. On the 14th day, Merritt hit a stretch of wall behind the baseboard near the fireplace where the paint simply would not release. He worked at it with a heat gun while I scraped the panel beside him. After perhaps 20 minutes, he pulled the baseboard away entirely to get better angle, and that was when the envelope fell. It landed on the new hardwood floor without drama. A small rectangle of cream paper, sealed with a single word written on the front, in handwriting I recognized before I bent to pick it up. Oh, Francis never called me Otis in private, only ever O. I stood holding it for a long moment. Merritt had gone completely still beside me, heat gun pointed at the floor, watching without speaking. He understood without being told that this required space. I walked to the porch. Sat in the chair I had claimed since childhood visits to the Keys, the one with the slight lean to the left, that Frances had always threatened to have repaired, and never did. The bay was flat and gray that morning, pelicans coasting low over the water. I opened the envelope. Her handwriting covered both sides of a single page. Dated March 2009, the month we bought the villa, several months before Tamara first visited and signed the camera acknowledgement. She had written it the week we painted these walls coral. For you, O, in whatever year you need this. I know you'll come back to this house eventually, and I know when you do. Something will need fixing. That's always been your way. You go where the problem is, fix it, move on. But this house isn't a problem to fix. It's the place we chose to stay. I painted these walls the color of sunrise because I wanted us to wake up every morning inside something that was still becoming not finished. That's what this house is. That's what we are. Whatever needs fixing when you read this, fix it. And then stay. Stay past the fixing. Stay when there's nothing left to repair except the habit of leaving. That's the hardest thing I ever asked of you, and I never found the courage to ask it out loud. I'm asking now. Stay, O. Please stay. F. I read it twice. Then I folded it along its original creases and held it. The pelicans passed again in the opposite direction. Frances had known me well enough to hide a letter she never sent. Known that I would need it at some point in some form for reasons she could not predict. She had placed it behind a baseboard near the fireplace, our fireplace, the one we lit every December, even though Florida winters rarely justified it and sealed it and waited 14 years for someone to need it badly enough to pry the baseboard free. She had not known it would be Merritt's heat gun that freed it. She had not known what year I would find it or what would have happened in the interim. She had simply trusted that the house would hold it until the right moment. I sat with that for a long time. When I came back inside, Merritt was still working. He had replaced the heat gun with a regular scraper and was making slow, steady progress on the stretch of wall that had defeated him earlier. He did not ask what the letter said. He waited. She hid it behind the baseboard when we painted this room, I said. 15 years ago. He nodded, kept scraping. She asked me to stay, I said. Past the fixing. Are you going to... The question was simple. No sentiment in it. Just a question. Yes, I said. We went back to work. That evening I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. The LED over the stove cast everything in pale yellow light. Outside, the bay had gone from gray to dark blue, to something approaching black, and the lights of distant boats moved across it at intervals like slow signals. I wrote without planning, which was unusual for me. 30 years of professional discipline had trained me to outline before writing anything of consequence. Risk assessments, financial summaries, testimony preparation, everything structured before the first sentence. This I wrote directly. Tamara, I am at the villa. Your mother left a letter behind the baseboard near the fireplace dated 2009 asking me to stay past the fixing. I found it today. I thought you should know it exists, that she was thinking about both of us long before any of this happened, writing messages she never sent to both the future and the people she loved. She was always doing that. You had her habit of anticipating. I never told you that often enough. I have no list of things I want to say. I have no argument to make about the trial or the evidence or the choices we each made. Those are all documented now in federal records, and they will stand without my commentary. What I want you to know is that the coral is coming back. Merritt and I have been removing the white paint for 3 weeks, and the original color is returning. We are about halfway through the living room. The house looks strange in sections, half white, half coral, but it is moving toward what it was. I think that is what I can offer you. Not forgiveness, because I'm not certain either of us is ready for what that word requires. Not an explanation for 5 years, because I have already told a federal court everything I know about my own failures, and it did not make them smaller. Only this: the house is here. Your mother's color is here. I am here. When and if you are ever able to receive visitors, I will come. I will not make you ask twice. Dad. I read it back once, sealed it in an envelope addressed to the federal facility in Miami, where Tamara had been remanded pending sentencing in April. Wrote her legal name and assigned registration number in the upper left corner as the Bureau of Prisons website required. Placed it on the kitchen counter beside my keys. She might not read it. She might read it and feel nothing, or feel only anger, or feel something she had no language for yet, because some emotions take years to become legible. I could not control any of that. What I could control was sending it, remaining present enough to send it. staying in this house through the discomfort of not knowing whether any of it would ever be received the way I meant it. Merritt appeared in the kitchen doorway, sleeves rolled past the elbow, a faint smear of old coral-colored paint along his left forearm, from where a chip had caught him. He saw the sealed envelope on the counter. "Look at me?" Said nothing. "If morning," I said. "Same time." "Same time," he said. He poured 2 glasses of water and set mine on the table without being asked. Outside, the bay moved through its dark rhythms, indifferent and patient, the way large water always is. The pelicans had gone to wherever pelicans go at night. The lights of the far boats continued their slow crossing. I was not watching for exits anymore. I was watching the water the way Frances always had, not to measure the distance from shore, but simply because it was there, and she was present enough to see it. That was the whole lesson. It had always been that simple. I turned off the kitchen light, went to bed, stayed. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Don't make my mistake. Don't run from grief thinking distance will heal it. I spent 5 years, 8,000 miles away believing I was protecting myself from pain. Instead, I created a void where my daughter needed a father. The daughter I left behind became someone I didn't recognize, and I gave her the anger to fuel that transformation. This family betrayal didn't happen overnight. It grew in the space I left empty. Every family story has 2 sides. I believed I was the victim of my daughter's crimes. I was. But I was also the father who abandoned her. Family betrayal often starts with family absence. I believe God allowed me to survive this to tell you that presence matters more than perfection. Stay. Even when grief feels unbearable. Your family story doesn't have to end the way mine did. Every family story can find redemption if you choose to stay. If this family story moved you, I'd be grateful if you'd leave a comment telling me what you think. Should I have done things differently? Would you have made the same choices? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about redemption and second chances, please subscribe to Revenge Dad. Your presence here matters. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details in this story were adapted for reflection and storytelling, but the lesson about presence, absence, and family is real. God bless you.